When we think about World War II, we often picture battles on faraway shores. But what's truly incredible is how that war reached right into every single American home, every factory, every farm, and completely remade the nation from the inside out.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How could a war fought oceans away change everything back home? That's what we're going to unpack today. And trust me, the answers are pretty fascinating. They really tell the story of how America became the country we know.
All right, so first, let's set the scene. Before the war, America was, it was looking inward. The country was still deep in the muck of the Great Depression, and honestly, the last thing most people wanted was to get tangled up in problems brewing over in Europe and Asia. The mood was definitely, let's stay out of it.
And this really puts it into perspective. Just look at the contrast here. On one side, you've got America in the 1930s, totally crippled by the Depression. Then, bam, just a handful of years later, it's the most powerful economy on the planet. It's an unbelievable transformation, and that's the journey we're on.
Okay, so the home front mobilizes. After Pearl Harbor, everything changed in the blink of an eye. The U.S. had to pivot, and I mean fast. This wasn't just a matter of sending soldiers to fight. No, this was about turning the entire country into one gigantic machine built for one purpose: winning the war.
Think about it. Millions of men suddenly went off to fight. So what happens back home? You've got this huge problem, a massive labor shortage. Who's going to build the tanks? Who's going to grow the food? Who's going to keep the whole country from grinding to a halt? The answer to that question, it changed American society forever.
And boom! Here's the answer. An icon was born, Rosie the Riveter. She was so much more than just a cool poster, right? She was the symbol for millions of real women who rolled up their sleeves and marched into factories and shipyards. They proved, without a doubt, that they could handle the tough, grimy, industrial jobs that people had always said were men's work.
Okay, so when you're fighting a war that big, you need a ton of resources. And that meant back home, shortages were gonna happen. It was just inevitable. So the government came up with a solution: rationing. This was a whole system designed to limit what each family could buy, making sure there was enough to go around for the soldiers and that things were at least somewhat fair for everyone.
And we're not talking about luxury goods here. I mean, look at this list. Sugar, gasoline, meat, butter. These were the absolute basics of daily life. Can you imagine having to carefully plan your meals because you only got so much meat and sugar? Or trying to get by on just a few gallons of gas a week? This wasn't just for some people, this was the reality for everybody.
So how do you keep a whole country motivated through all this? Propaganda. The government launched this huge campaign. You would have seen posters like these absolutely everywhere. They used really powerful images to build up that sense of patriotism, that feeling that we're all in this together. It was all about making every single person feel like they had a crucial part to play.
Now for our next section, everyone pitched in. Because this whole mobilization thing, it went way beyond just the factories. The war effort seeped into every part of life, into neighborhoods, into homes. Ordinary folks, even kids, were finding all kinds of ways to do their part.
And this just shows you how deep it all went. I love this. People were planting victory gardens in their own backyards to grow extra food. Kids were out there collecting scrap metal, old tires, literally anything that could be recycled. Nothing was too small. Think about that. Even the tinfoil from a pack of gum was saved because it was seen as a resource for the war. Amazing.
All right, next up is society in flux. Because the war didn't just change what people did, it changed where they lived. The demand for workers set millions of Americans in motion. We're talking about one of the biggest internal migrations in the nation's history, and it completely reshuffled the country's population.
And yeah, to put a number on it, we're talking about millions of Americans packing up everything they owned and moving across the country. Why? For jobs in these new war production factories. This completely reshaped entire cities and communities. Sometimes it felt like it happened overnight.
At the same time, there was another critical shortage on the farms. To deal with that, the government created something called the Bracero program. This was a huge deal. It was an agreement that brought agricultural workers over from Mexico to fill those gaps. They played an absolutely essential role in making sure the country and the troops had enough food. But we have to talk about the dark side of all this change. Tragically, in what was a complete betrayal of American ideals, the government did something awful. Fueled by wartime hysteria and prejudice, they rounded up 120,000 Japanese Americans, most of whom were U.S. citizens, and forced them from their homes into internment camps, where they were held for years.
And getting back to the new roles people took on, women's contributions went way beyond the factory floor. They did just about everything. They were nurses working close to the front lines. They were truck drivers. They were even pilots ferrying military planes. They also joined brand new military branches created just for them, like the WWII and the Waves. They were breaking down barriers left and right.
But, and this is so important to remember, new opportunities did not mean instant equality, not even close. Women often got paid less than men for the same job and had to deal with harassment. And for African Americans, the hypocrisy was staggering. They were serving their country, fighting for freedom abroad, all while being forced into segregated units and facing ugly discrimination both in the military and back home.
So let's look at America after the war. When the dust finally settled, the country that came out of it was almost unrecognizable from the one that went in. It was transformed. America was now a totally new kind of global power, with a completely different sense of its place on the world stage.
And honestly, this table just sums it all up perfectly, doesn't it? Before the war, Great Depression. After, world's strongest economy. Before, isolationist. After, global superpower. And maybe most importantly, those old, rigid social roles, they were shaken to their core, and that planted the seeds for the huge social changes that were coming.
Yeah, the war's legacy didn't just end when the fighting stopped in '45. Not at all. It was more like a chain reaction. The U.S. helped found the United Nations, stepping into that global leadership role. And the experiences of black soldiers and workers during the war, that directly lit a fire under the civil rights movement, which gained incredible momentum in the years that followed.
So if there's one big takeaway here, it's this. All that sacrifice, all that collective effort, it forged a brand new American identity. This shared national experience created a sense of unity like never before. And it proved that massive, deep social change wasn't just a dream, it was actually possible. And that kind of leaves us with a final, big question to think about. The war forged this new identity, and it taught an entire generation what they could accomplish when they all pulled together for a common cause. So the question for us, looking back, is, are we still living by those lessons of unity and sacrifice today?